We all know that Cyberpunk 2077 sequel is like a good 8 years away at least, with The Witcher 4 currently in full production and other Witcher projects in early development, like The Witcher 1 Remake, which is scheduled ahead of Cyberpunk Orion. I'm not the type of person to usually eagle-eye a game that's years out from release, but I was scrolling through the Cyberpunk subreddit called Low Sodium Cyberpunk, which is a more casual and fun than like the main subreddit for Cyberpunk. But yeah, I came across this post that was asking what are some of the things players would like to see more in the next game, or new additions that would beef up Cyberpunk's open world. And I found a lot more interesting topics than I thought I would. It's usually just the basic stuff that people say, like, more player freedom. Like, okay, no duh. There's some interesting ideas I found in the replies though that I thought it could actually work if they implemented it well. And I'm talking about things that are within reasonable expectations for a video game. I think the worst thing that all of that Cyberpunk hype did was it created this unrealistic expectation of some really cool ideas that don't make sense in like a gameplay loop. Like flying cars with vehicle combat. Stuff like that almost always will be a modded edition because it's just impossible to create two separate driving systems and combat systems, like one on the ground and one in the air, in a reasonable scope. So I'm talking about things that are very likely to be in the game, and it's just about executing them right. But yeah, let's go through some of the comments here. This is out of my ordinary form of content that I usually make videos on, so bear with me if I'm out of my element here. Okay, so the first comment that immediately caught my eye was actually from the OP themselves, though I can't get them credit since the account is deleted. But this first point here says, definitely more Braindance detective work and perhaps expand a little bit by adding more layers. Also, ability to view non-quest Braindances. Imagine going to a Braindance shop and buy them to watch later in your apartment. I could not agree more with this first point here. One of the things that I liked about Phantom Liberty the most was that they removed all of the mandatory Braindances. And not because I didn't like the idea of using a biochip to relive moments from a robbery or a murder, but it was because it felt very shallow and incomplete of a system. The last green audio layer is almost never utilized, and when it is, it doesn't really serve a purpose outside of the dialogue that you're already going to receive. I wish that Braindances were more important in terms of finding hidden clues and secrets in, like random quests or added lore to the game. Instead, all they really serve to do is provide you with information you're gonna get anyways, and so it really felt like it was a tacked on feature, and I 100% agree that they need to be more complex and in-depth in Cyberpunk 2. The OP also makes a good follow-up suggestion, and he's referencing the Cyberpunk lore book here, but saying he wants more quests where we would see unique implants that aren't combat specific. This sort of falls into that customization of Cyberpunk that people want to see, and although I personally like how customizable it already was in terms of like cyberware and outfits and things like that, there was always room for more customization. Unlimited customization doesn't exist in video games, but it can almost always be more. So yeah, I think just on a personal note, way more customizable weapons into working many different ways, like turning a 7.62 assault rifle into a beam rifle, or turning a 9mm pistol into explosive hand cannon or revolver. I know I'm getting very Fallout with saying that, but I feel like the customization for weapons was the most limiting aspect of Cyberpunk, at least in terms of combat. The third point OP makes is more interactions with gangs, being able to join a gang and take part in gang feuds, or simply more exposure to gang wars. This one I think is a slam dunk, and I don't think we need to worry about this one at all. But it's good to talk about it still. I don't know which update added the gang chases you'd see randomly when you're riding through Night City, or when the gangs would retaliate against you for doing certain amount of gigs in their region. But I remember feeling like the game was so much more lived in than it was at the start of the game. Also, something I don't see people bring up too often is police behavior in regions where you are allied with or against certain gangs. It would be so cool to be able to get away with petty crimes all because you're sided with a particular gang in this region, or police are more suspicious on you and they crack down on you more when you're in a rival's territory. It almost would be like the Dying Light 2's faction system, where you have these two factions and choosing one over the other has its rewards and drawbacks, although it doesn't really play out like that in Dying Light 2 to be honest, but you get what I mean. But now onto the comments themselves, and the first one here is from Jake Paul Official, and he says, just a good story with twists and cool characters, and also music. By music, I guess he means a good OST. I'm sure he understands that the game will indeed have music, but this is something I talked about at the end of my Phantom Liberty video, and it's that the characters and story in Phantom Liberty is 100 times more in depth and interesting than the base game is, at least to me. And you can say, well, the base game had like 6 or 7 different endings, while Phantom Liberty had really only like 2. And yeah, that's the whole point. At least for me, they were able to keep the story more focused while still letting you have the same level of player freedom. I didn't vibe with anyone from the main story outside of maybe like Takimura or maybe Rogue in some parts. I kind of like Rogue's story. And I think that's because his storyline was so much more interesting to me. The sort of like, like the redemption arc, like you having to redeem yourself. I really find those storylines very interesting. The companion storylines kind of felt like an afterthought that was tacked on to add depth to V, Johnny, and Takimura's storylines. They just didn't feel, I guess, emotionally in depth enough, at least compared to Phantom Liberty. And so yeah, I totally agree. Cool characters and a great storyline with twists. That's all we can really hope for. This one is from JTruth9, which says, more dynamic stealth kills, 1-button quick hack combo uploads, cooler bullet blocking animations. And I guess I'll start by saying, I think the stealth kills are plenty dynamic enough as they are. Maybe a more refined stealth skill tree? I think that's actually way more important than cooler looking stealth kills, at least personally. Also, cooler bullet blocking animations. Again, that's just sort of falls into like the animations in general of the game. I'm sure that those will be improved across the board, so I'm not really worried about that one. Another comment here from LT_Johnson says, recreational BDs and lots of them. More verticality and rewards for exploration in the form of rare clothing items and stuff. More interactiveness with NPCs. More sort of in-game games, like how Witcher had Gwent. A flashlight or an upgrade that lets you see in low visibility situations. Yes, I definitely agree with that one. Some sort of jetpack or transportation by air. Triple jump. More stealth kill options. Bow and arrow. I definitely agree with that. I agree with a lot of the stuff he said here. More genuine options for stealth rather than just a suppressor. That is definitely key. More weapons, more, skill options, stuff like that. Also, I could have sworn they removed the legendary clothing items because people complained about how armor was tied to clothing. The part here about in-game games, God, that's a tongue twister. I absolutely agree with it though. I think I speak for everyone when I say in-game mini games. There aren't some dinky arcade games and that are actually fun and addicting, like he said, Gwent from The Witcher, or even playing poker or blackjack in Red Dead 2. I would spend a good 2 hours just straight gambling in Red Dead, and it was some of the most fun I had playing. The last comment I'll bring up, since you kind of get the gist of most of this honestly, customization, open world interactivity, more in-depth combat system for stealth, more skill options for net running and stuff, better driving mechanics. Oh, I also forgot to mention one part for me is a day-night cycle where NPCs have a schedule of things they do every day like they do in Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 would also be awesome. But you get the gist of it at this point, so we'll look at one last comment here from Mistress_Ploppy that says, more Chooms. You know what, Mistress Floppy? I couldn't agree more. All the Chooms in the world would be preferable. But yeah, I'll link the Reddit thread in the description if anyone wants to look through the replies. Although, again, most of them echo the same sentiment. Cyberpunk 2077 got a lot right, it got a lot wrong, but it got very little perfect. I don't want to hear, that's not possible. You can't please everyone. Everyone has different expectations. I'm not saying to cater to the fan base on everything. I am saying that anything they do add or change to Cyberpunk 2 or Cyberpunk 2078, whatever it's going to be called, to make it work as intended and as seamless as possible. Also a non-buggy, non-glitching, crashing, stutter mess, because we know the game's going to be huge, and even though they likely have already learned their lessons from Cyberpunk 2077's launch, it's still possible they can repeat the mistakes. You can't put anything past companies nowadays. That's just my 2 cents on it and the whole wish list or possibilities of things that could be in the next Cyberpunk game. Let me know what some of the things are for y'all wish list and things I didn't mention or bring up. I hope you enjoyed this video. This is very out of the type of videos I like to usually make. It's sort of like analysis type of videos I usually make, or story deep dives kinda. So for me, going into discussion threads and just reading comments and just seeing what people think, all the different opinions that are in there, it's not something I usually do, but it was actually really fun and I'm glad I did it. But anyways, that's it for me. I'll see you next time.